Introduction: The life that has been trying to speak to you. Have you ever noticed that life has a peculiar way of repeating itself? It is as if you are walking through a gallery of mirrors, only to discover that no matter which room you enter, you keep encountering the same figure staring back at you. Perhaps you find yourself frustrated by a series of romantic partners who all seem to lack the same emotional availability. Maybe you have changed careers 3 times, yet you somehow arrive at the same destination, feeling undervalued and overlooked by leadership. Or perhaps you have lived in different cities, surrounded by different people, only to find that your internal landscape, your anxiety, your doubt, your sense of struggle, remains identical, regardless of the zip code. Most of us view these recurring events as a stroke of cosmic misfortune. We assume life is a chaotic sequence of random occurrences, a game of chance where some are dealt a winning hand and others are left to weather a persistent storm. We look at the external world, our bank accounts, our partners, our professional challenges, as the starting point. We believe that if we could just fix the outside, the inside would finally find peace. If the boss were kinder, the partner more attentive, or the salary higher, then, and only then, would we be happy. But what if you have the order of operations entirely backward? What if your life is not a random collection of events happening to you, but a precise, unwavering reflection of what is happening within you? This is the central premise of the mirror effect. It is the realization that the world you see is not a static reality, but a responsive surface. When you change the image standing before the mirror, the reflection must inevitably change. To attempt to change your life by rearranging external circumstances without first addressing the internal state is akin to staring at a mirror and trying to fix the smudge on your own face by rubbing the glass. You can scrub the glass forever, but until you tend to the source, yourself, the smudge will always remain. This book is an invitation to stop looking at your life as an enemy to be conquered or a mystery to be solved. Instead, we will begin to view it as a mirror. A sophisticated, intelligent, and deeply honest feedback system. This feedback system is constantly providing you with data regarding your deepest beliefs, your unresolved emotional wounds, and the subconscious narrative you hold about your own worthiness. Many of us go through life in a state of reaction. We are like leaves on a river, tossed about by the currents of other people's moods, economic shifts, and unexpected tragedies. We have forgotten that we are not the leaves, we are the water. By shifting our focus from the external chaos to the internal source, we move from being victims of circumstance to becoming the conscious creators of our own experience. This journey requires courage. It requires the willingness to admit that while we may not be responsible for every event that has ever occurred in our past, we are entirely responsible for the meaning we assign to it and the internal state we carry forward. It is not about blame. It is not about saying, "I caused this terrible thing to happen." It is about empowerment. It is about recognizing that if you are the one perceiving the problem, you are also the one who possesses the key to the solution. Throughout these 15 chapters, we will deconstruct the psychological and spiritual mechanics of how we manifest our reality. We will explore how neuroscience explains the ways our brains are wired to confirm what we already believe, how emotional wounds act as magnets for specific types of dysfunction, and how to rewrite the invisible blueprint that governs your choices. You are about to embark on a process of radical self-discovery. You will learn to observe your life with the detachment of a scientist and the compassion of a sage. You will learn that your frustrations, your triggers, and your persistent obstacles are not there to punish you, they are there to wake you up. They are the breadcrumbs leading you back to the parts of yourself that have been ignored, denied, or forgotten. When you finish this book, you will no longer see the world through the narrow lens of "happening to me." You will see it through the expansive lens of "responding to me." You will gain the tools to stop the cycle of repetition and to start intentionally cultivating the inner state that produces the life you truly desire. The mirror is waiting. It is time to see what it has been trying to tell you all along. Let us begin by turning our attention toward the world you think is random, and discovering why it is anything but. Reflection questions. When you look at your life over the last 5 years, what is one pattern or theme that seems to keep repeating itself, regardless of your external changes? How often do you find yourself waiting for someone else or a specific situation to change before you feel allowed to be happy or at peace? If your current life were an exact mirror of your internal thoughts and beliefs, what would that tell you about the way you currently view yourself? Are you willing to release the need to blame external circumstances in exchange for the power to change your inner response? Chapter Summary. Life often presents us with recurring patterns that feel like random misfortune, but these are often reflections of our internal state. The tendency is to try and fix the outside circumstances, people, money, to achieve internal peace, which is inherently ineffective. The mirror effect dictates that our outer world is a responsive surface. To change the reflection, we must change the source, our inner self. Viewing life as a feedback system, rather than a collection of random events, turns obstacles into valuable data for personal growth. Responsibility is not the same as blame. Acknowledging our role in our reality is the ultimate form of empowerment. The journey of transformation requires shifting from a state of constant reaction. Chapter 1. Your outer world is never random. Why does it feel like the universe has a sense of humor, specifically one that enjoys repeating the same punchline at your expense? You know the feeling. The same type of person enters your life, behaves in the exact same damaging way, and leaves you wondering, how did I end up here again? We are conditioned to see these occurrences as accidents of fate. We categorize them as bad luck, poor timing, or the result of being in the wrong place at the wrong time. We act as if the world is a chaotic, sprawling mess where events collide with no rhyme or reason. However, when we begin to study the mechanics of human consciousness and behavioral patterns, a more profound truth emerges. What we perceive as random is, in reality, a highly structured, self-reinforcing loop. The outer world is not a sequence of disconnected, unpredictable events. It is a meticulously calibrated reflection of your internal frequency. Think of your mind as a high-powered projector. You are walking through life carrying a film reel of your beliefs, fears, past conditioning, and expectations. You are projecting this reel onto the screen of the external world. Because you are the one holding the projector, you assume the images on the screen are independent realities. You shout at the screen, trying to move the shadows, unaware that the shadows are moving because you are moving the film inside the machine. From a neuroscientific perspective, this is not just a metaphor, it is the function of the reticular activating system, RAS. The brain is constantly bombarded with millions of bits of information every second. To prevent sensory overload, the RAS acts as a filter, allowing only information that aligns with your existing internal model of the world to reach your conscious awareness. If you believe, on a deep, subconscious level, that the world is a hostile place where people eventually take advantage of you, your RAS will actively scan your environment for evidence to support that belief. It will highlight the rude driver, the dismissive coworker, and the unreliable friend, while simultaneously filtering out the kindness, the support, and the opportunities for connection that are also present. You are effectively proofreading your own life, ignoring the data that contradicts your story and emphasizing the data that confirms it. This is why you can be in a room full of people and have an experience entirely different from the person standing next to you. You are not experiencing the same world, you are experiencing your interpretation of it, filtered through the specific requirements of your internal belief system. When we understand this, the random nature of our struggles begins to dissolve. If you are consistently attracting the same financial stress, it is not because the economy is inherently against you, it is because your internal belief about your worthiness and your capacity to handle resources is dictating the choices you make. And the things you ignore, on a daily basis. If you are consistently finding yourself in volatile relationships, it is not because the world is devoid of stable people, it is because your internal definition of love and security is subconsciously drawing you to people who validate your childhood understanding of what a relationship feels like. This is not to say that objective events do not occur. Bad things happen to good people. Tragedy strikes without regard for our mindset. However, there is a fundamental difference between a single tragic event and a pattern of tragedy that repeats throughout a life. The pattern is what we are addressing here. The pattern is your inner world signature. When we stop viewing our challenges as random, we gain our agency back. If the world is random, we are victims. If the world is a mirror, we are architects. The shift is subtle but absolute. When you look at an unpleasant situation, a difficult boss, a dwindling bank account, a feeling of perpetual overwhelm, and ask, what part of my internal orientation is this reflecting? you move from a position of powerlessness to a position of inquiry. You begin to realize that your life is a feedback loop. Every time you face a challenge, life is showing you exactly where your internal development has stalled. It is showing you the exact belief that you need to examine and potentially upgrade. The external world is the most honest mentor you will ever have. It is the only one that will not allow you to lie to yourself about who you are and what you believe. This requires a radical shift in perspective. Instead of reacting with frustration, you start reacting with curiosity. When the same conflict arises for the 10th time, you stop asking, "Why is this person doing this to me?" and start asking, "What is this situation teaching me about what I still believe about myself?" This inquiry is the bridge between the life you have and the life you are capable of creating. It moves you from the role of passive observer to that of active participant. The outer world is not random because it is a response to you. It is a mirror held up to your soul, showing you the shape of your thoughts, the depth of your fears, and the power of your potential. When you change the frequency of your internal world, the external world has no choice but to adjust. It must shift to accommodate the new reality you are holding within. You are not waiting for life to change, you are waiting for yourself to realize that you are the one holding the remote control. Chapter Summary. Recurring patterns in life are rarely random luck, they are precise reflections of internal belief systems and subconscious expectations. The mind functions like a projector, and the external world serves as the screen upon which our inner beliefs are displayed. The reticular activating system, RAS, acts as a filter that confirms our existing beliefs by highlighting matching evidence and ignoring contradictory data. We often proofread our own lives to support limiting beliefs, ignoring positive data that doesn't fit our internal narrative. Shifting from a victim mindset to one of curiosity allows us to use life's challenges as data for internal growth. The world acts as a feedback loop. By identifying the internal beliefs reflected in external patterns, we can consciously initiate change. Responsibility is found in the transition from reacting to life to architecting it. We have the power to change the Chapter 2, The Invisible Blueprint Behind Every Experience. If you were to look at the architecture of a house, you would see the finished walls, the roof, and the windows. But if you wanted to change the structure, you wouldn't start by painting the walls a different color. You would go to the architect's office and find the original, invisible blueprint. Your life is the house, and your subconscious beliefs are the blueprints. Most of us spend our lives trying to renovate the house. Patching up relationships, trying new jobs, moving to new neighborhoods, while the original, invisible blueprint remains untouched. We often assume that our conscious mind is the pilot of our life. We think we are making logical, well-informed decisions based on our desires and intelligence. However, psychological research suggests that the conscious mind processes only a tiny fraction of the information our brains handle daily. The vast majority of our behaviors, reactions, and perceptions are governed by the subconscious, the storehouse of every memory, experience, and belief we have accumulated since birth. This subconscious database acts as an invisible navigation system. It does not care whether your goal is to be happy, successful, or loved. It cares only about efficiency and consistency. Its primary job is to ensure that your outer reality matches your inner map. If your inner map suggests that success is dangerous or love always ends in betrayal, your subconscious will work tirelessly to protect you from those outcomes, even if your conscious mind claims to want them. It will sabotage a flourishing career or push away a healthy partner because those things do not align with the blueprint you have been operating under for decades. This is the hidden psychological tension that causes so much internal suffering. It is the gap between what you say you want and what your subconscious believes is safe or true. We experience this as a feeling of being stuck, as if we are trying to drive a car with one foot on the gas and the other firmly pressed on the brake. We push hard in the external world, yet we move nowhere. Neuroscience calls this cognitive dissonance, but in the context of the mirror effect, it is simply a signal of an outdated blueprint. Your subconscious is not malfunctioning. It is performing its duty exactly as it was programmed. If you were taught as a child that your worth was tied to your performance, your brain built a blueprint where worth equals output. As an adult, you will inevitably find yourself in situations where you are overworked, underappreciated, and constantly chasing the next achievement just to feel a fleeting sense of value. You haven't chosen this path consciously, but your blueprint has engineered it for you. To change the blueprint, you must first become aware of it. Most of us live so closely with our own beliefs that we mistake them for objective facts. We say, people are unreliable, as if that were a universal law of nature, rather than a narrative we have adopted. The moment you begin to question the laws of your life, the blueprint begins to lose its rigidity. You start to see that your beliefs are not prisons, they are simply programs that can be rewritten. This requires a level of brutal honesty that few people are willing to exercise. You have to look at your recurring struggles and stop asking, why is this happening, and start asking, what belief system makes this look like the only possible outcome? When you can trace your current frustration back to a foundational assumption, you reach the architect's table. The process of rewriting your blueprint is not about positive thinking or wishful affirmations. It is about deep, structural realignment. It is about identifying the core belief, the load-bearing wall, of your identity, and dismantling it, piece by piece, to replace it with a new, more expansive structure. When you change the blueprint, the house must change. You stop trying to force the external world to suit your needs, and you start inhabiting a new reality that naturally produces the circumstances you desire. This is why some people seem to transform their lives almost overnight while others struggle for years. Those who transform quickly have realized that the external world is a slave to the internal blueprint. They stop fixing the walls and start working on the foundation. When you commit to this level of work, you are no longer just living, you are building. You are taking responsibility for the invisible architecture that has dictated your life, and you are finally becoming the architect of your own future. Chapter Summary. Life experiences are governed by an invisible blueprint, composed of subconscious beliefs formed throughout our lives. The conscious mind is rarely the primary driver of our actions. The subconscious manages the vast majority of our behaviors to maintain internal consistency. The subconscious prioritizes efficiency and safety over conscious desires, often sabotaging success if it conflicts with long-held internal beliefs. Internal tension arises when our conscious goals contradict our subconscious programming, acting like driving with the gas and brakes pressed simultaneously. Cognitive dissonance is a useful signal that your current reality is conflicting with an outdated or limiting belief. Treating subjective beliefs as universal, laws of nature, prevents personal evolution. We must learn to identify and challenge our core assumptions. Structural transformation requires moving from fixing external. Chapter 3, Meeting the Person in the Mirror. We spend most of our lives looking outward. We focus on the behavior of our colleagues, the temperament of our partners, and the state of our bank accounts. We are experts at analyzing everyone else's motivations and identifying all the reasons why the world is failing to meet our needs. Yet, there is one person we are remarkably avoidant of meeting: ourselves. We treat our own consciousness as a blind spot, assuming we already know exactly who we are, what we want, and why we do what we do. But the person you see in the mirror is often a stranger, obscured by layers of social conditioning, defense mechanisms, and unexamined habits. Self-awareness is not merely a personality trait or a meditative exercise, it is the fundamental prerequisite for every lasting transformation. Without it, you are simply repeating the same cycles under the guise of growing. You can read every self-help book on the shelf and attend every seminar available, but if you do not know who is doing the reading or who is attending the seminar, you are just adding information to a static identity. You are putting new wallpaper on a crumbling foundation. The first step in meeting the person in the mirror is developing the capacity for objective self-observation. Imagine you are a scientist studying a rare specimen. You do not judge the specimen, you simply observe its behaviors, its reactions to stimuli, and its patterns of movement. When you begin to observe yourself with this same level of detached, compassionate curiosity, the ego begins to lose its grip. You stop identifying with your thoughts, your emotions, and your past failures, and you start identifying with the consciousness that is witnessing them. Neuroscience reveals that this practice of metacognition, thinking about your own thinking, activates the prefrontal cortex, the area of the brain responsible for higher-level executive function. When you move from being caught in an emotional reaction to observing it, you shift out of the reactive, fear-based amygdala and into the logical, intentional center of your brain. In that moment of pause, the mirror effect begins to shift. You are no longer a victim of your impulses. You are an observer of them. When you start to meet yourself, you will inevitably encounter parts of yourself you have spent years ignoring. You will find the wounded child who feels unworthy of love, the inner critic who thrives on perfectionism, and the fearful ego that seeks safety at the expense of growth. This can be an uncomfortable encounter. It is much easier to blame a difficult boss for your stress than to admit that your own need for validation is what keeps you trapped in a cycle of overfunctioning. It is much easier to blame a partner for a lack of intimacy than to confront your own inability to be vulnerable. But this meeting is where your power resides. Once you recognize these parts of yourself, they no longer operate in the shadows of your subconscious. They become visible, manageable, and eventually, transformable. You realize that you are not these parts, you are the one who is witnessing them. This separation is the beginning of true freedom. Authentic self-awareness also requires you to interrogate your own motivations. Why do you want what you want? Are you chasing financial success to feel secure, or are you chasing it to prove something to a parent who never saw you? Are you seeking a committed relationship to share your life, or are you looking for someone to save you from your own loneliness? When you pull the curtain back on these motivations, the reflection in the mirror changes. You stop projecting your needs onto the world and start fulfilling them within. When you finally stop running from your own reflection, something magical happens. The external world stops feeling so demanding. You no longer need your partner to be perfect, because you have stopped relying on them to make you feel whole. You no longer need your career to provide all your self-worth, because you have found that worth at your own core. You become stable, grounded, and centered. Meeting the person in the mirror is the most courageous act you will ever undertake. It is a return to your own essence. It is the end of the search for a savior, because you have discovered the one who was here all along. You realize that you have never been separated from the peace, the abundance, and the love you have been seeking. You have only been separated from the truth of who you really are. Chapter Summary. Self-awareness is the foundational requirement for all personal transformation. Without it, we simply repeat old patterns. We often have a massive, blind spot regarding our own motivations, behaviors, and core beliefs, preferring to focus on external circumstances. True self-awareness involves detached self-observation, treating oneself as a subject of study rather than an object of judgment. Metacognition, thinking about our thinking, shifts the brain from reactive, fear-based patterns to intentional, executive-level processing. Encountering suppressed parts of ourselves, such as the inner critic or the wounded child, is uncomfortable but essential for growth. Identifying the why behind our desires is critical. We must discern if our pursuits stem from self-empowerment or from a need to mask internal voids. When we take responsibility for our internal landscape, the external world loses its power to manipulate our emotional state. The ultimate goal of meeting the person in the mirror is to realize that we are the source of our own peace and fulfillment, ending the external search for value. Chapter 4, The Stories That Quietly Control Your Life. We are, at our core, creatures of narrative. From the moment we develop language, we begin to construct a story about who we are, where we fit, and what the world expects from us. We take the raw, chaotic data of our childhood, the praise and the criticism, the triumphs and the traumas, the implicit lessons about what was safe and what was forbidden, and we weave them into a coherent identity. By the time we reach adulthood, we aren't really living in the objective world. We are living inside the story we have told ourselves about that world. This internal narrative acts as the invisible script for our lives. If your script says, "I am the one who always gets passed over," you will subconsciously structure your professional life to validate that story. You might show up late, speak tentatively in meetings, or choose employers who are historically dismissive. You will do all this not because you are incompetent, but because your identity is committed to maintaining the integrity of your story. The brain, in its relentless pursuit of consistency, will reject any reality that conflicts with your established identity. It is a psychological defense mechanism. There is a profound, albeit painful, comfort in being right about who you are. These stories are often formed in the crucible of childhood. When we are young, we have limited agency and limited perspective. If a caregiver was emotionally unavailable, a child does not conclude, "My caregiver is struggling with their own emotional limitations." A child concludes, "I am not worthy of attention." That singular, flawed conclusion becomes the cornerstone of their identity. Decades later, that individual is still walking through life waiting for someone to finally see them, subconsciously pushing away those who do, because being seen doesn't fit the established, comfortable narrative of being the one who is overlooked. This is how childhood conditioning dictates our adult trajectory. We are essentially running programs written by a version of ourselves that no longer exists. To break this cycle, we must begin to treat our identity as a living, breathing entity that we have the authority to edit. You are not a static monument to your past, you are the author of your present. The first step in rewriting your story is to identify the recurring themes in your life. Look at your life as an objective observer and ask, what is the genre of my life story? Is it a tragedy where I am the victim? Is it a heroic struggle where I am constantly fighting against impossible odds? Is it a comedy of errors where nothing ever goes right? Identifying the genre is the first step toward changing it. You cannot write a different ending if you are still trying to play the same character. Neuroscience provides a powerful path for this, neuroplasticity. We now know that the brain is not a fixed organ, it is constantly rewiring itself based on our thoughts, experiences, and conscious intentions. When you intentionally challenge your old narrative, you are literally changing the physical structure of your brain. Every time you consciously choose a new thought, such as, "I am capable of creating value regardless of external validation," you are strengthening a new neural pathway. Over time, that pathway becomes the default, and the old, limiting story begins to atrophy from lack of use. This is not about ignoring your past or pretending that trauma didn't happen. It is about deciding that the past does not have to be the pilot of your future. You can acknowledge the events of your history while refusing to let them define your destiny. You are not the events, you are the meaning you have assigned to them. When you change the meaning, you change the story. Consider the consequences of holding a limiting identity. Every day you spend living in an outdated script is a day you are withholding your true potential from the world. You are so busy playing the role you were assigned as a child that you have no energy left to explore the person you are actually capable of becoming. This is the tragedy of the unexamined life, not that we suffer, but that we settle for suffering that we have the power to resolve. As you move through this process, you will find that some of the people and circumstances in your life will no longer fit the new story you are writing. This is a natural consequence of the mirror effect. As you shift your identity, the reflection must shift as well. People who were attracted to the victim version of you may drift away because you are no longer playing your part in their script. Do not fear this. The space created by these departures is the vacuum that your new, more authentic life will rush to fill. You are the narrator of your life. You have the pen, the paper, and the authority to change the plot. It is time to stop reading from the script you were given and start writing the one you were born to live. Chapter Summary. We live within internal narratives, scripts formed in childhood, that subconsciously dictate our adult experiences and identities. The brain prioritizes consistency, it will subconsciously sabotage success to ensure our reality matches our established, often limiting, self-story. Childhood conclusions, such as, "I am unworthy," or "I am invisible," become the foundation of our adult character if left unexamined. Identity is not fixed, we have the power to edit, rewrite, and consciously evolve our internal narrative at any time. Neuroplasticity allows us to physically rewire our brains by intentionally practicing new thoughts and beliefs, making them our default over time. Changing our story requires identifying the genre of our lives, e.g., victim, struggler, and deciding to write a different character. As our identity shifts, the external world must adjust. Letting go of people and situations that fit the old you is a necessary part of the transformation. The primary task of maturity is taking the pen from our younger condition. Chapter 5, Healing the Wounds You Keep Projecting. We all carry internal maps of our past hurts. These wounds, rejections, betrayals, moments of profound powerlessness, are not just memories stored in the brain, they are active emotional charges that color everything we see. When we fail to process these experiences, we do not simply get over them. Instead, we project them onto the present. We walk through the world like someone wearing tinted sunglasses, unaware that the world isn't dark. The lens we are looking through is. Projection is a primary mechanism of the human psyche. It is the unconscious act of attributing our own unresolved feelings to the people around us. When you feel a sudden, disproportionate surge of anger at a colleague for not responding to an email, the intensity of that emotion rarely comes from the email itself. It comes from an old, unhealed wound. That colleague has become a blank canvas upon which your mind is projecting a past experience of being ignored or undervalued. You are fighting a ghost from your past while convinced you are dealing with a person in your present. The tragedy of projection is that it creates a self-fulfilling cycle. By reacting to your partner or peer as if they are the person who hurt you in the past, you behave in a way that eventually causes them to act exactly like that person. If you project the belief that everyone eventually leaves, you may become clingy, suspicious, or distant, behaviors that push people away, thereby proving your projection was correct. This is the mirror effect in its most destructive form. We create the very abandonment we fear, all while believing we are merely protecting ourselves from it. Healing these wounds requires a move from projection to ownership. Ownership means recognizing that your emotional triggers are your own property. If someone says something that causes you to spiral into shame or rage, the trigger belongs to you, not to them. They have merely pressed a button that was already installed in your internal circuitry. When you stop blaming others for making you feel a certain way and instead treat the trigger as an invitation to look inward, you stop the cycle of projection. Neuroscience offers a compelling framework for this: emotional regulation. When we are triggered, the amygdala hijacks the brain, flooding our system with chemicals that prepare us for fight or flight. In this state, higher reasoning is temporarily offline. The path to healing is learning to expand the space between trigger and reaction. In that gap lies your agency. By acknowledging the physical sensations of the emotion, the tightness in your chest, the heat in your face, without immediately acting on them, you begin to de-escalate the brain's alarm system. You are effectively training your nervous system to remain present even when old pain is activated. Forgiveness is often misunderstood as a moral obligation, but in this context, it is a psychological necessity for your own liberation. Forgiveness is not about condoning the behavior of others or telling them that what happened was okay. It is about releasing the anchor that keeps you tied to a past version of yourself. When you refuse to forgive, you are keeping the wound open and active. You are carrying a heavy burden of resentment, which ensures that you remain trapped in the past. To heal the wound, you must stop rewounding yourself by constantly reviewing the injustice in your mind. You must also learn to navigate the territory of shame. Shame is the belief that there is something fundamentally wrong with you, and it is the most potent inhibitor of healing. Unlike guilt, which is, I did something bad, shame is, I am something bad. This deep-seated belief causes us to hide our true selves and project a curated, armor-plated identity. Healing requires the courage to bring these hidden parts of yourself into the light. When you acknowledge your pain, your failures, and your perceived flaws, they lose their power to control you. They cease to be secrets that dictate your behavior and become stories that integrate into the wholeness of who you are. As you heal these internal wounds, you will find that the difficult people in your life seem to change, or they simply stop appearing. This is not a coincidence. When you are no longer projecting your unhealed trauma onto others, you no longer invite the same dynamic into your life. You become more resonant with stability, healthy boundaries, and clear communication. You are no longer living in reaction to the past, but in response to your present. The goal is not to become a person who has never been hurt. The goal is to become a person who has integrated that hurt into a greater sense of wisdom and self-compassion. You are healing the person you were, so that the person you are becoming can finally breathe. Chapter Summary. Unhealed emotional wounds act as filters, causing us to project our past pain onto current relationships and circumstances. Projection is an unconscious defense mechanism where we attribute our own unresolved feelings to the people around us. We often trigger the very behaviors we fear in others through our own preemptive defensive actions, creating a self-fulfilling loop. Emotional triggers are our personal property. Taking ownership of them allows us to stop blaming others and start dismantling the trigger internally. The gap between a trigger and a reaction is where our agency lives. Extending this gap allows us to regulate the nervous system rather than succumbing to the amygdala's fight or flight response. Forgiveness is a tool for personal liberation, not a validation of past wrongs. It is the act of dropping the anchor to the past. Shame is a primary barrier to healing. Bringing hidden, shameful parts of ourselves into the light is the only way to neutralize their control over our behavior. As we heal internal wounds, we stop attracting the same dysfunctional dynamics. Chapter 6: The Emotional Frequency You Live From. We tend to think of emotions as weather, passing states that happen to us, like a sudden rainstorm or a brief patch of sunshine. We believe we are subject to these moods, and we assume that if we are feeling anxious, stressed, or discouraged, it is simply a reflection of our current life circumstances. But what if your emotions are not the weather, but the climate? What if your internal emotional landscape is the very thing creating the circumstances you are living through? The emotional frequency you live from is the signal you are broadcasting to the world. It is the invisible vibration of your being, and according to the laws of both resonance and perception, the world must respond to that frequency. When you operate from a state of scarcity, fear, or resentment, your nervous system is in a state of high alert. You are constantly scanning for threats, and because your brain is a pattern-matching machine, it will reliably find them. You are essentially tuning your internal radio to a station of struggle, and it is no surprise that your life produces a soundtrack of stress. Neuroscience gives us a clear understanding of why this happens. When you are in a chronic state of a low-frequency emotion, such as chronic anxiety or frustration, your brain's chemistry changes. You are flooding your system with cortisol and adrenaline. Over time, your body becomes chemically addicted to these stress hormones. You may consciously want peace, but your body is physically craving the hit of stress because that is the state it has been trained to maintain. This is why it is so difficult to simply think positive. When you are deep in a cycle of negativity, your body is actually fighting you. To change your frequency, you must move beyond the level of the mind and enter the level of the nervous system. You cannot outthink an emotional habit. You have to retrain the body. This involves becoming a student of your own internal states. Most of us are so dissociated from our bodies that we don't realize we are in a state of stress until we have a full-blown physical reaction. We ignore the tight jaw, the shallow breath, and the racing thoughts until they become a crisis. Developing emotional awareness is the first step toward sovereignty. It means checking in with yourself throughout the day. Not asking, "What am I thinking?" but "What is the quality of my energy right now?" Is your energy constricted, guarded, and reactive? Or is it open, present, and expansive? When you recognize that you have slipped into a lower frequency state, you have the opportunity to intervene. You don't have to wait for the world to improve to change your internal climate. You can use breathwork, movement, or intentional cognitive shifts to reset your nervous system. It is vital to understand that emotional mastery is not the suppression of negative emotions. You do not achieve a high frequency by burying your anger or pretending you are happy when you are not. Suppression is actually a low-frequency act. It requires a massive amount of energy to hold those feelings down, and it keeps you in a state of internal conflict. Emotional mastery is the ability to experience your emotions without being defined by them. It is the ability to feel the frustration, acknowledge it, and then choose a different state of being, a state of curiosity, acceptance, or detachment, that serves you better. When you consistently live from a higher frequency, a state of calm, intentionality, and gratitude, you become a beacon for new possibilities. This is not some mystical concept, it is observable behavior. When you are calm, you make better decisions. You listen more effectively. You are less likely to overreact to conflict. People naturally respond to you with more respect and cooperation. Your internal frequency is literally changing the way people interact with you, which, in turn, changes the outcomes of your daily life. Consider your financial life, for example. If you operate from a frequency of lack, every transaction feels like a loss, every bill feels like a burden, and every opportunity is viewed through the lens of what might go wrong. You are operating from a contraction state. But if you shift your frequency to one of value and contribution, you begin to see opportunities where others see obstacles. You approach money as a tool for exchange rather than a limited resource to be hoarded. Your behavior changes, and as a result, your financial reality begins to shift. You are the regulator of your own frequency. You are not a thermometer, reflecting the room temperature of your environment. You are a thermostat, setting the temperature for your reality. Every moment of your day is a choice. You can choose to perpetuate the frequency of your past, or you can choose to cultivate the frequency of the future you wish to inhabit. The choice is yours, and the reflection is waiting to catch up. Chapter Summary. Emotions are not just transient weather, they are the climate of your internal state, creating the circumstances you live through. Your emotional frequency acts as a signal that the external world responds to, and your brain's pattern-matching function seeks evidence to confirm that frequency. Chronic negative emotions create a physiological addiction to stress hormones like cortisol, making it physically difficult to shift into a positive state through thought alone. Changing your frequency requires retraining the body and the nervous system, not just the mind. Emotional awareness involves checking in with your energy levels throughout the day rather than just your thoughts. Emotional mastery is not the suppression of negative feelings, but the ability to experience them without being defined or controlled by them. Operating from a higher frequency, calm, intentionality, presence, alters your decision-making and how others perceive and interact with you. We are the thermostats of our own reality, by intentionally cultivating an internal state of. Chapter 7, Changing the Reflection by Changing Yourself. If you stand before a mirror and see a face that looks tired, frustrated, or defeated, your first instinct, the one that has governed human behavior for millennia, is to reach out and touch the glass. You want to wipe away the exhaustion, smooth out the lines, or force a smile onto the reflection. We do this in life by trying to control our circumstances. We change jobs, end relationships, or try to manage other people's behaviors, all in the desperate hope that the external world will finally give us the relief we crave. But the mirror effect remains absolute. You can rearrange the room, but you cannot change the reflection until you change the person standing in front of the glass. True, lasting transformation is an act of identity shifting. It is not about doing different things, it is about becoming a different person. When you shift your identity, your actions, choices, and outcomes change as a natural, effortless byproduct. This is why people who try to white-knuckle their way to a new life through sheer force of will often fail. They are trying to graft a new behavior onto an old identity. If you try to build a habit of financial abundance while holding a deep-seated identity of someone who is always struggling, the identity will eventually win. You will sabotage your progress because the new behavior feels like a lie to your subconscious. To change your identity, you must embrace the principle of personal responsibility. This is often the most challenging concept to accept because it feels like you are blaming yourself for your pain. But there is a massive distinction between blame and responsibility. Blame is about the past, it is a judgment about who was at fault. Responsibility is about the present. It is the radical acknowledgement that you are the only one with the power to influence your future. When you take full responsibility for your internal state, you take back your power from the people and circumstances you have been blaming for your unhappiness. This process begins with intentional growth. You must decide who you are going to be, regardless of what the external world is currently showing you. If you want a life defined by confidence, you must start acting with confidence before you feel confident. This is the neuroscience of acting as if. When you consistently act in alignment with the person you intend to become, you are signaling to your brain to create new neural pathways. You are literally building the biology of your new self. Over time, the acting stops and the being takes over. Emotional regulation is the engine of this identity shift. As you attempt to change, your old self, the one comfortable in its familiar patterns, will resist. You will experience doubt, fear, and the urge to retreat into old, destructive habits. This resistance is not a sign that you are failing, it is a sign that you are succeeding. It is the friction of your old identity struggling to survive. When you feel this, you must learn to regulate your emotions, grounding yourself in the present moment rather than allowing the panic to force you back into your old ways. You also have to become the gatekeeper of your own environment. If you are trying to change your identity, you cannot continue to feed your brain the same information, surround yourself with the same stagnant influences, or entertain the same internal dialogues that created the old you. Your environment. What you read, who you spend time with, and what you consume, is a mirror that either supports your evolution or reinforces your stagnation. You must intentionally curate an environment that reflects the version of yourself you are currently building. This level of intentionality requires a transition from being a reactive observer to a conscious creator. Most people live by default, allowing their habits, their past, and the opinions of others to dictate their reality. When you decide to change yourself, you stop living by default and start living by design. You ask yourself, what would the version of me who is already living this new reality think, feel, and do today? By answering that question and taking action, you are bridging the gap between who you are and who you are becoming. As you transform, you will find that the external world begins to shift in ways that seem almost uncanny. Opportunities appear that were never there before. Difficult people become less relevant, or they change their behavior in response to your new energy. The reflection has no choice, it is a law of nature that the image must follow the object. You are not changing the world, you are changing the source of the world. You are becoming the architect of your own reflection, and in doing so, you are discovering that the power you have been searching for has been within you, waiting to be claimed, all along. Chapter Summary. We cannot change our external reality by manipulating the reflection, external circumstances, we must change the object, our identity, standing before the mirror. Lasting change is an identity shift, behavior change without an identity shift is fragile and often leads to self-sabotage. Personal responsibility is the radical acknowledgement that while we didn't choose our past, we are the only ones responsible for our present trajectory. Acting as if is a neurological tool to build new neural pathways, helping the brain adapt to a new identity before the external world validates it. Resistance to change is not a sign of failure but a sign of the old identity struggling to survive. Emotional regulation is key to navigating this friction. Curating your environment, what you consume, who you interact with, and your internal dialogue, is essential to supporting your new identity. Moving from reactive, default living to intentional, design-based living allows you to consciously bridge the gap between your current self and your future self. As your internal identity stabilizes, the external world must reflect. Chapter 8, Breaking the Cycle of Repeating Patterns. Have you ever wondered why life keeps presenting you with the same, final exam, over and over again? You study, you try a different approach, you change your outfit, or you move to a new town. Yet there you are, sitting in that same exam room again, facing the same type of person or the same type of disaster. We often feel like we are trapped in a loop, condemned to relive the same lessons until we have learned them. In reality, the loop is not a cage, it is a curriculum. The reason patterns repeat in our lives is simple, the lesson has not yet been integrated. As long as you are still reacting to a situation with the same internal frequency, whether that is fear, resentment, or a sense of victimhood, the situation remains the only way for the universe to show you where you are stuck. The pattern is not trying to hurt you, it is trying to teach you. Once the lesson is fully learned. Once your internal response shifts from a place of contraction to one of mastery, the external exam loses its purpose and disappears. Think of these recurring patterns as the feedback loop of your consciousness. If you consistently find yourself in relationships that require you to sacrifice your self-worth, the universe is not punishing you for being bad at love. It is reflecting your lack of self-boundary. The pattern will continue, perhaps with different partners, until you finally reach the point of, I choose my own peace over this dynamic. The moment you make that internal decision, the external pattern is broken. You have completed the curriculum. Neuroscience calls this pattern completion. The brain is wired to predict the future based on past experiences. If your past taught you that you are someone who gets taken advantage of, your brain will subconsciously look for evidence to complete that pattern. It will draw you toward people who will eventually cross your boundaries. To break the cycle, you have to consciously interrupt the pattern completion process. You have to recognize the urge to repeat the old behavior and choose to respond differently. This is a difficult task because your brain will protest, arguing that the old way is safer because it is at least familiar. To break these cycles, you must develop the habit of pattern recognition. This involves becoming an objective observer of your own life. When you feel that familiar pull of a recurring conflict, you must step back and ask, what is this situation demanding of me that I have refused to give to myself? Usually, the answer is a missing piece of emotional integrity. A boundary, a release of a grudge, or the reclamation of a piece of your identity you abandoned long ago. It is also important to recognize that patterns often repeat because we are attached to the identity associated with them. There is a strange, perverse comfort in being the person who always struggles with money or always has drama in their family. It provides a sense of self. To break the pattern, you have to be willing to kill the version of yourself that needs the struggle to feel significant. You have to be willing to walk into the unknown, where you no longer have your story of struggle to lean on. This is why many people fear change. They don't fear the loss of the struggle, they fear the loss of their own identity. If you are no longer the one who is fighting, who are you? The answer is, you are the conscious creator of your life. But that requires a level of self-reliance that most people spend their entire lives running from. Breaking the cycle also requires forgiveness, not for the people who hurt you, but for yourself for having stayed in the cycle for so long. Stop shaming yourself for the time you wasted in the loop. Every moment you spent there was necessary to build the level of awareness you now have. You were not losing time, you were gaining the wisdom required to finally step out of the loop. When you successfully break a pattern, the world will often test you. It is as if the universe wants to be sure you have really learned the lesson. You might find yourself in a situation that is almost identical to the one you just escaped. This is the moment of truth. If you revert, the loop continues. If you stay firm in your new identity, the door closes on that chapter forever. Breaking the cycle is the ultimate act of self-liberation. It is the moment you stop letting your past dictate your present. It is the moment you take the wheel and decide that no matter what has happened before, you are now moving in a new direction. The loop ends when you say it ends. Chapter Summary. Recurring life patterns are not punishments but a curriculum. They repeat until the internal lesson is integrated and the identity shifts. The universe uses feedback loops to mirror our internal lack of boundaries or unresolved issues until we take responsibility for them. Pattern completion is the brain's tendency to recreate familiar, even painful, situations. We must consciously interrupt this process to break the cycle. Pattern recognition, the ability to observe our own reactions as they arise, is the essential skill for breaking free from old scripts. We often remain in cycles because we are attached to the identity of the one who struggles. We must be willing to let that identity die to evolve. Forgiving oneself for the time spent in past cycles is vital for moving forward without the weight of shame or self-recrimination. Testing is a natural part of the breaking process. The universe will present similar scenarios to ensure the internal shift is authentic. The cycle ends only. Chapter 9, when life feels like it's working against you. There are moments when the trajectory of your life feels less like a smooth path and more like a collision course. A project fails, a relationship dissolves, a financial opportunity vanishes, or a health challenge arises. In these moments, it is entirely natural to look at your reality and conclude that life is working against you. It feels as though the universe has conspired to block your progress, thwart your desires, and remind you of your own limitations. Yet, from the perspective of the mirror effect, these setbacks are not roadblocks, they are the most important signposts you will ever receive. When you experience a significant setback, the natural human reaction is to search for a culprit. We look for someone to blame, or we curse the unfairness of the system. We want the pain to stop, and we want to return to the comfort of what we were trying to achieve. However, if you can pause, breathe, and detach from the emotional storm, you will see that a setback is actually a form of feedback. It is life's way of saying that your current approach, your current internal orientation, or your current identity is out of alignment with the outcome you are trying to produce. Consider the metaphor of an archer. To propel an arrow forward with force, you must first pull the string backward. In life, the backward movement often feels like failure, but it is actually the buildup of potential energy. A setback is often a necessary reset that stops you from continuing down a path that was never going to lead to the fulfillment you seek. When a door slams shut, it is not just a rejection, it is a redirection. It is the mirror effect preventing you from wasting more of your life force on an endeavor that is not a match for your true evolution. Neuroscience helps us understand this through the concept of homeostatic disruption. Your nervous system is constantly trying to maintain a status quo, a comfort zone of behaviors and beliefs. When you try to grow beyond that zone, you will inevitably hit resistance. You will experience failure, doubt, or external challenges. Most people interpret this as a sign to stop. But in reality, this resistance is simply your old, biological operating system, trying to pull you back to the familiar. If you push through this resistance by expanding your internal capacity, you will find that the setbacks actually contain the seeds of the growth you need to succeed. Reframing failure is the hallmark of the conscious creator. When you stop seeing failure as an indictment of your worth and start seeing it as data, your entire life changes. You no longer have to fear setbacks because you know they are merely temporary conditions that reveal where you need to recalibrate. If a business deal fails, instead of asking, "Why am I unlucky?" you ask, "What did this situation teach me about my own decision-making process, my own boundaries, or my own level of preparation?" You turn the tragedy into a masterclass. It requires emotional maturity to sit with discomfort. We are a culture that is obsessed with immediate relief. We want to fix, move on, and forget as quickly as possible. But healing and transformation happen in the quiet moments after the storm, when you are willing to look at the wreckage and ask yourself the hard questions. What were you ignoring? Where were you acting from fear? What belief about yourself was being reflected back to you in that failure? It is also vital to recognize that sometimes, life works against you because it is protecting you from the consequences of an alignment that was not in your best interest. You may have been chasing a specific goal, a job, a relationship, a financial target, that was fueled by insecurity or a desire to prove your worth. If you had succeeded, you might have found yourself trapped in a reality that would have eventually crushed your spirit. By blocking that path, the mirror effect was actually saving you. When life feels like it is working against you, your greatest act of power is to drop your resistance to the present moment. Resistance to what is creates suffering. Acceptance of what is creates the foundation for change. When you accept the setback, you stop fighting reality and start working with it. You stop being a leaf tossed in the wind and become a navigator who understands the currents. You are being prepared for a reality that is larger than the one you are currently struggling to achieve. The setbacks are not evidence that you are failing, they are evidence that you are being refined. They are the fire that burns away the dross, leaving only the strength of your true character behind. Keep your eyes on your internal state, hold your vision, and trust that the resistance you are facing is the necessary friction that will eventually launch you into your next chapter. Chapter Summary. Setbacks are not random acts of hostility from the universe, they are vital pieces of feedback indicating a need for internal recalibration. The backward motion of a failure is often the necessary tension required to launch you toward greater future growth. Resistance is a natural reaction of our internal, operating system attempting to maintain a comfort zone. Pushing through this is how we expand our capacity. Reframing failure as data, rather than indictment, prevents us from taking setbacks personally and allows us to learn from them. True transformation requires the maturity to sit with discomfort and analyze the internal beliefs that contributed to the setback. Some obstacles are protective interventions that prevent us from chasing goals rooted in insecurity that would ultimately harm us. Acceptance of the present moment is the antidote to suffering. Resistance only creates a friction that makes moving forward more difficult. Setbacks are acts of refinement, burning away outdated parts of our identity. Chapter 10, Relationships as Mirrors. We often view relationships as a pursuit of completion, searching for that one person who will balance our temperament, fill our voids, and finally make us feel whole. We look for a partner, friend or colleague who provides what we feel is missing in ourselves. The problem is that a relationship built on the need to fill an internal deficit is destined to become a battlefield. When you view another person as your source of validation or security, you are essentially handing them the remote control to your nervous system. You become a hostage to their mood, their approval, and their consistency. In the philosophy of the mirror effect, relationships are the most precise instruments of self-discovery available to us. They are not merely connections between two people, they are interactions between two subconscious belief systems. Every person who enters your life is carrying a mirror, and they are holding it up to you every single day. The traits in others that irritate you the most, the dynamics that cause you the most pain, and the behaviors you find yourself obsessing over are rarely just about the other person. They are revelations of parts of yourself that have been disowned, suppressed, or left unhealed. This is the psychological principle of the shadow. When you react with intense emotional volatility to someone else's selfishness, it is often because you have repressed your own need to advocate for yourself. You are not just angry at them, you are angry because their behavior reflects the very parts of you that you have forbidden yourself to express. Conversely, when you find yourself deeply attracted to someone's confidence or success, it is often because you are seeing a dormant, unacknowledged potential within yourself that is waiting to be claimed. Neuroscience shows our brains are built for social resonance. We have mirror neurons that allow us to experience what others are experiencing, effectively blurring the lines between self and other. This biological wiring is why we can be so profoundly impacted by those close to us. However, this resonance also means that when we enter a relationship, our subconscious scripts interact. If your script involves, "I am not enough," you will likely attract someone whose script involves, "I am the one in charge," creating a perfect, albeit painful, reinforcement of your respective subconscious programs. To transform your relationships, you must move from being a projector to being a mirror watcher. When a relationship dynamic becomes difficult, instead of focusing on what the other person is doing wrong, pause and ask, "What does this interaction reveal about my own internal orientation?" If you are constantly feeling ignored, ask yourself where you are ignoring your own needs. If you feel constantly criticized, ask yourself where your internal critic is running the show. You will find that when you change your internal orientation, the dynamic with the other person inevitably shifts. Either they change their behavior in response to your new energy, or they simply no longer resonate with you and drift away. Healthy relationships are not those where two people fix each other. They are those where two people have taken responsibility for their own internal worlds and are choosing to support each other's growth. True intimacy is the ability to show up as your authentic self, with your own boundaries intact, and to allow the other person the freedom to do the same. It requires a high level of emotional regulation. When you are triggered by a partner, your nervous system wants to fight or flee. The mature response is to stay present, own your reaction, and communicate from a place of clarity rather than a place of defensive pain. Forgiveness in relationships is a powerful tool for this. It is not about letting someone off the hook for poor behavior, it is about taking your hook out of their behavior. It is about realizing that their actions are a reflection of their own internal map, not a statement of your worth. When you stop taking the actions of others as a personal indictment, you lose the ability to be manipulated by them. You become an island of stability. The goal is to stop using relationships as a venue for healing old wounds and start using them as a space for shared expansion. When you clear your own inner world of the debris of the past, you stop attracting the people who serve as mirrors for your dysfunction. You begin to attract people who serve as mirrors for your potential. You start to see that the most profound relationship you will ever have is the one you maintain with yourself, because that is the foundation upon which all other connections are built. The mirror is always reflecting, make sure you are proud of the person standing in front of it. Chapter Summary. Relationships are not meant to fill internal voids, they are mirrors that reflect our own subconscious beliefs and disowned parts, our shadow. Intense emotional reactions to others, specifically irritation or obsession, are often indicators of parts of ourselves we have suppressed or neglected. Mirror neurons create a biological link between people, making our social environment a powerful extension of our internal state. Transformation in relationships begins by shifting from projecting our needs onto others to observing what the dynamic is revealing about our internal orientation. Healthy relationships require two individuals who have taken full responsibility for their own emotional regulation and inner world. True intimacy is found when both parties can exist authentically and independently without attempting to fix or control the other. Taking the hook out of others' behavior through forgiveness allows us to detach our self-worth from their actions. Shifting our internal landscape inevitably changes the quality of our external connections, moving us from attracting dysfunctional mirrors. Chapter 11, Money, Success, and the Mirror Effect. We are taught from a young age to view money and success as external trophies, rewards that are won through sheer exertion, clever tactics, or favorable luck. We look at the wealthy and the successful and assume their outer reality is a result of something they did that we have failed to do. This perspective keeps us in a cycle of chasing, straining, and inevitably burning out. However, if we view the mirror effect through the lens of abundance, we discover a counterintuitive truth: money and success are not things you get, they are things you resonate with. Your financial life is perhaps the most sensitive barometer of your internal belief system. Money is simply an energetic medium of exchange, and it responds with mathematical precision to your internal state of worthiness. If you carry a subconscious blueprint of scarcity, a belief that resources are limited, that you are fundamentally not enough, or that success is a dangerous or greedy pursuit, you will subconsciously push abundance away, no matter how hard you work. You can work 80 hours a week, but if your internal thermostat is set to survival mode, your life will continue to reflect a reality where you are just barely getting by. The neuroscience of this is rooted in our reward processing systems. When we act from a place of fear or lack mentality, we activate the brain's threat detection centers. This shuts down the prefrontal cortex, the exact region required for strategic planning, creativity, and the long-term thinking necessary to build sustained success. You become trapped in a scarcity loop, focusing only on short-term fixes and reacting to every financial pressure as if it were a life-or-death situation. This nervous system activation essentially blinds you to the opportunities that exist right in front of you. To change your financial reflection, you must first dismantle the identity of the struggler. This involves a brutal audit of your subconscious beliefs about money. Do you believe that money is inherently evil? Do you believe that you are only worth what you can produce? These narratives are invisible ceilings that flatten your reality. To break through, you must begin to foster a sense of internal abundance before the bank account reflects it. Abundance is a frequency, it is a state of mind that says, I am a source of value, and the world is a place of infinite possibility. This is not a call for reckless spending or delusional thinking. It is a call for a shift in your fundamental relationship with value. When you start operating from a place of value contribution rather than value extraction, the dynamic changes. You stop asking, how can I get more money from the world, and start asking, how can I provide more value to the world? When your internal focus shifts to contribution, you become a magnet for opportunity. You are no longer chasing, you are attracting. Success, too, is a mirror. If you chase success to prove your worth to others, you will find that even when you make it, you feel empty. This is because the external reflection, the job title, the recognition, the balance, can never fill a hole that was dug by an internal belief in your own insufficiency. You will always be haunted by the imposter syndrome, that nagging fear that the external world will eventually discover the truth of your unworthiness. True success is the byproduct of internal congruence, when your outer achievements are a natural expression of your inner conviction that you belong in the room. We also have to address the fear of what success will cost. Many of us subconsciously sabotage our progress because we fear that having more will mean losing our freedom, becoming someone we dislike, or experiencing the judgment of others. These are counterintentions. Your conscious mind wants the money, but your subconscious mind is trying to protect you from the perceived risks of that success. To change the reflection, you must align your entire internal system. You must resolve the conflict by deciding that your success will be an extension of your integrity, not a departure from it. As you realign your internal blueprint to support abundance, you will notice that your behavior changes. You will start making decisions from a place of calm and clarity rather than desperation. You will say no to opportunities that drain you and yes to those that expand you. You will stop competing and start collaborating. The outside world will start responding to this new frequency. Clients, partners, and resources will start to appear as if by luck. But you will know the truth: you haven't been lucky, you have simply become the kind of person that abundance is naturally drawn to. Your success is not happening to you, it is happening through you. When you clear the internal debris, the fear, the scarcity, the need for external validation, your natural state of prosperity can finally emerge. You don't need to force the mirror to change. You only need to align yourself with the reality you wish to inhabit, and watch as the world rearranges itself to meet you there. Chapter Summary. Money and success are not external rewards to be chased, they are reflections of our internal resonance and subconscious beliefs. A subconscious blueprint of scarcity keeps us in a survival loop, activating threat detection systems that inhibit strategic, creative thinking. Scarcity is a frequency, not an objective reality. Our internal thermostat dictates the amount of value we feel comfortable receiving. Shifting from value extraction, chasing money, to value contribution, providing worth, is the key to becoming a magnet for opportunity. External success cannot fill an internal void of worthiness. True success is the expression of an already established inner sense of belonging. We often sabotage our success due to counterintentions. Subconscious fears that having more will cost us our integrity, freedom, or identity. Realignment requires resolving internal conflicts so that our goals are in full harmony with our values and our deepest self-conception. When our internal blueprint is aligned with abundance, our decision-making becomes calm and intentional, naturally attract. Chapter 12, Daily Practices that Transform the Reflection. We often make the mistake of believing that transformation is a singular, momentous event, a light bulb moment that forever changes our trajectory. While awareness is a necessary spark, it is the daily tending of the flame that creates a lasting fire. If you treat your internal world like a neglected garden, you cannot be surprised when it produces only weeds. Transformation is not a weekend workshop, it is a discipline. It is the mundane, daily practice of choosing who you are, over and over again, until that choice becomes your default biological state. The most effective practices for the mirror effect are those that help you move from the reactive, subconscious mind to the conscious, intentional mind. These are not chores to be crossed off a list, they are the rituals of an architect. When you engage in these practices, you are literally sculpting your nervous system and training your brain to perceive a different world. Journaling, when used with intention, is perhaps the most powerful tool for this. Most people use journals to vent, which is helpful for clearing emotional clutter, but we must take it further. Use your journal to bridge the gap between your current state and your desired state. Ask yourself, what is the belief system underlying my frustration today? Or, how would the version of me who has already mastered this challenge respond to this situation? By writing out these answers, you bring the hidden, subconscious drivers of your life into the light of the prefrontal cortex, where they can be examined, dismantled, and rewritten. Mindfulness is equally essential, though it is often misunderstood as a passive act. In our context, mindfulness is the active practice of noticing. It is the moment-to-moment tracking of your internal frequency. Throughout your day, set an intention to pause and perform a state check. How does your body feel? What is the quality of your thoughts? Are you in a state of flow or a state of contraction? When you catch yourself in a low-frequency state, perhaps you are feeling defensive or panicked, you do not need to judge yourself. Simply notice it, breathe, and consciously reset your nervous system. This is the practice of self-regulation in action. Visualization is the process of using your imagination to pre-play the reality you wish to inhabit. The brain, in many ways, cannot distinguish between a vividly imagined event and a real one. When you spend time each day visualizing yourself handling a conflict with grace, or operating in your professional life with confidence, you are priming your brain's reticular activating system (RAS) to look for evidence that supports this new reality. You are effectively pre-wiring your success. This is not about wishful thinking, it is about intentional neurological conditioning. Gratitude is the final, essential ingredient. It is not just about being polite or keeping a list of things you enjoy. True, profound gratitude is a radical act of shifting your frequency from lack to already fulfilled. When you focus on what you have, you are telling your brain that you are in a state of resourcefulness, not a state of need. This allows you to perceive opportunities that your brain literally filters out when you are in a state of desperation. Gratitude opens the aperture of your perception, allowing you to see the abundance that is always present but often obscured by our own internal blinders. Consistency is more important than intensity. It is far better to spend 10 minutes every morning setting your intention and anchoring your focus than to spend 3 hours once a month trying to fix your life. Your brain is a creature of habit, it learns through repetition. By consistently engaging in these practices, you are signaling to your subconscious that this new way of being is the new standard. You are signaling that you are no longer willing to live by the old, default programming. As you incorporate these practices, do not be surprised if your external circumstances don't change immediately. The mirror has a lag time. You are shifting the internal source. The external reflection must move to catch up. Do not get discouraged by the lack of immediate physical evidence. Your job is to keep frequency. Your job is to stay the course, even when the world around you hasn't caught up yet. Your life is the product of your daily rhythm. When you change what you do every day, you change who you are. When you change who you are, the mirror has no choice but to show you something entirely new. You are building a new life, one day, one thought, and one intentional breath at a time. The cumulative effect of these small, persistent choices is nothing short of miraculous. Chapter Summary. Transformation is a discipline, not a one-time event. It requires the daily tending of our internal state. Practices should move us from the reactive subconscious to the intentional conscious mind, effectively sculpting our nervous system. Journaling is an investigative tool used to expose and rewrite the subconscious belief systems driving our daily reactions. Mindfulness is the active, moment-to-moment practice of state checking, noticing when we drift into low-frequency states and consciously resetting. Visualization is a method of neurological conditioning that prepares the brain to recognize and inhabit the reality we are creating. Gratitude shifts the brain from a state of lack to a state of resourcefulness, allowing us to see opportunities we were previously blinded to. Consistency is the key to neurological change. Repetition signals to the subconscious that our new identity is the new default. The external world has a lag time in reflecting internal shifts, persistence in holding our new 13, becoming the person your future is waiting for. We often treat our future as a destination we are traveling toward, a place where, once we arrive, we will finally be the person we have always wanted to be. We imagine that if we just work hard enough or wait long enough, we will eventually become someone worthy of our deepest desires. But mirror effect tells us that order is actually reversed. You do not become the person you want to be after you receive your desires. You must become that person first, and then the desires will find their way to you. The person your future is waiting for is not the person you are today. If your current self were already capable of inhabiting your ideal life, you would already be living it. Your current reality is a perfect match for your current identity. To expand your reality, you must perform a radical act of identity expansion. You must step into the shoes of your future self. Not in your imagination, but in the way you make decisions, the way you set boundaries, and the way you hold yourself in the world today. This is the concept of identity-based living. When you are faced with a choice, stop asking, "What should I do?" and start asking, "What would the person I am becoming do in this situation?" This shift in perspective is transformative. If you are struggling with a career transition, the old you might choose out of fear or the need for immediate security. But the new you, the person who is already successful in that future, might choose based on long-term alignment, growth, and sustainable contribution. By making the choice that aligns with your future identity, you are effectively closing the gap between who you are and who you are destined to be. Neuroscience confirms that we have a powerful tool for this, our capacity for mental time travel. When you vividly imagine your future self, you are engaging the hippocampus and the prefrontal cortex in a way that creates a sense of pre-experience. You are giving your brain a map of where you are going. When you act in alignment with this map, you decrease the cognitive dissonance that typically keeps us stuck. You stop feeling like you are pretending, and you start feeling like you are stepping into. Becoming this person also requires the courage to outgrow your current environment. The people around you, the places you frequent, and the habits you maintain are all tethered to the identity you are trying to leave behind. You will find that as you commit to your new identity, the old world will try to pull you back. It will ask, "Who do you think you are?" or "Why are you changing?" This resistance is a natural part of the process. You must be willing to walk through the discomfort of being misunderstood by those who are still committed to the old version of you. This is where the practice of intentional detachment becomes critical. You aren't necessarily ending relationships or burning bridges, but you are creating a new level of internal space. You are no longer allowing the opinions, expectations, or limitations of your past to dictate your present behavior. You are prioritizing your internal resonance over external approval. This shift can be lonely at first, but it is the necessary precursor to attracting the people and opportunities that are a match for your new frequency. Your future self is not a stranger. It is the most authentic, aligned version of you that has been waiting for the current you to finally clear the way. You have been carrying a great deal of dead weight, old stories, unhealed wounds, limiting beliefs, and a preoccupation with what others think. As you shed these things, the person you are becoming begins to emerge. It is not about adding new things to your life, it is about uncovering what was already there, buried beneath layers of conditioning. As you step into this identity, you will find that the opportunities you were chasing start to pursue you. This is the ultimate proof of the mirror effect. When you become the frequency of the life you desire is forced to manifest in your world. You don't have to force, push, or strain. You simply have to be. Today, make a conscious decision to stop waiting for your life to arrive. Stop waiting for validation, success, or the right time to become who you know you are. Act, speak, think, and decide from the place of your future. The mirror is watching. The mirror is listening. And it is already beginning to shift, preparing to reflect the new you that has finally arrived. Chapter Summary. We do not become the person we want to be after achieving our goals. We must embody that identity first for the achievements to materialize. Your current reality is a perfect reflection of your current identity. To change the reflection, you must first upgrade the identity. Identity-based living involves making decisions based on what your future, more aligned self would do, rather than what your current, fear-based self would do. Mental time travel, vividly imagining the future, helps the brain create a neural map for our desired reality, reducing cognitive dissonance. Outgrowing your current environment, including old habits, opinions, and limiting associations, is a necessary part of claiming a new identity. Intentional detachment allows us to prioritize our internal resonance over external validation, creating space for new, aligned connections. Your future self is your most authentic, unconditioned self. Transformation. Chapter 14, Living as a Conscious Creator. We have been conditioned to view life as a series of circumstances that happen to us, a narrative in which we play the role of the protagonist who is constantly reacting to the plot twists thrown our way. We are taught to be observers of our destiny, not authors of it. Yet, the deepest realization of the mirror effect is that this role is a choice. You can live your entire life as a passenger in your own existence, or you can take the wheel and become a conscious creator. Living as a conscious creator is not about controlling every detail of your reality, it is about mastering the internal state from which your reality is born. To live as a conscious creator, you must move beyond the illusion of separateness. We tend to view ourselves as an internal being trapped inside an external world. We see a boundary where our skin ends and the world begins. But from the perspective of consciousness, there is no such division. Your thoughts, your beliefs, and your emotional resonance are not just things you have, they are the energetic fabric out of which your reality is woven. When you change your internal frequency, you aren't just changing your mind, you are changing the world you inhabit. The neuroscience of this lies in the brain's ability to participate in the construction of experience. You are not a camera recording a static world, you are an active participant, constantly shaping the input you receive through your expectations, your biases, and your attention. What you focus on, you fuel. When you focus on the obstacles in your life, you are fueling their presence in your reality. When you focus on the possibilities, you are fueling their manifestation. This is not magical thinking, it is the precise function of the brain's attentional systems, which prioritize what we deem important. Living as a conscious creator requires a state of radical presence. Most people are not living in the present, they are living in a replay of their past, or a rehearsal of their fears about the future. When you are lost in these loops, you are essentially living on autopilot. A conscious creator, however, anchors themselves in the now. It is only in the present moment that you have the power to choose. You cannot change your past, and you cannot influence the future from a state of worry. You can only create from now. By grounding yourself in the present, you open the door to the creative power that is always available to you. You also must become a guardian of your own attention. In a world designed to fragment our focus, our attention is our most valuable currency. Where you place your attention is where you place your life force. If you spend your time consuming media that emphasizes chaos, if you spend your time discussing what you hate, or if you spend your time relitigating your past failures, you are effectively giving your creative power away. To be a conscious creator, you must be disciplined about what you allow into your mind. You must consciously choose to focus on the outcomes you want to create, rather than the problems you want to avoid. This is the transition from trying to fix to choosing to create. When you are trying to fix, you are inherently focused on what is broken, which keeps that brokenness at the center of your attention. When you are creating, you are focused on the vision of what you wish to bring into existence. The energy is entirely different. One is rooted in fear and scarcity, the other is rooted in love and abundance. One produces more of what you don't want. The other produces the reality you are calling forth. You will find that as you embrace this role, your life begins to feel less like a struggle and more like a work of art. You stop fighting against the current and start flowing with it. You stop needing to know exactly how things will happen, because you trust in the process of your own internal alignment. You develop the wisdom to recognize when to act and when to wait, when to push and when to let go. You are no longer just living. You are participating in the unfolding of your own potential. As a conscious creator, you are also responsible for the impact you have on the world around you. When you are operating from a state of wholeness, you don't just transform your own reality, you elevate the frequency of everyone you come into contact with. You become a ripple in the pond, a silent influence that encourages others to step into their own power. Your life becomes a testimony to what is possible when one individual decides to stop being a victim of circumstance and starts being the architect of their own life. The world is waiting for you to stop waiting for it. It is waiting for you to realize that you are not a small, powerless entity in a vast, indifferent universe. You are the universe expressing itself through a unique point of consciousness. You are the source. You are the mirror. And the life you are creating is the masterpiece you were always meant to live. Chapter Summary. We choose whether to live as victims of circumstance or as conscious creators of our reality. This role is defined by our internal mastery. The illusion of separation between internal self and external world is broken when we realize our consciousness weaves the fabric of our experience. Neuroscience demonstrates that we are active participants in constructing our reality through our expectations, biases, and sustained attention. Radical presence is the only state from which we can effectively exercise our creative power. The past and future are simply mental loops. Attention is our most valuable currency. Guarding it from fragmented, chaotic, or negative influences is essential for conscious creation. There is a fundamental difference between fixing, which keeps us focused on brokenness, and creating, which focuses our energy on a desired vision. Moving from struggle to flow requires trusting our internal alignment and releasing the need to force the how of our goals. As conscious creators, we elevate our environment by simply inhabiting. Chapter 15, When the Mirror Finally Changes. You have arrived at the final threshold of this journey, but in many ways, this is merely the beginning. Throughout these pages, we have deconstructed the mechanics of your life, challenged the narratives that held you captive, and explored the profound, quiet power of the mirror effect. We have looked at how your subconscious creates your reality, how your triggers are your greatest teachers, and how your emotional frequency acts as the command center for your life. You have learned that you are not a victim of the events around you, but the conscious architect of the world you inhabit. There is a natural tendency, at the end of a process like this, to look for a grand finale, a sudden, earth-shattering shift in external circumstances that proves the work was done. But the most significant change often happens with such subtle, quiet elegance that you might almost miss it. You will wake up one morning and notice that a long-standing pattern of anxiety has simply dissolved. You will find that the person who used to ruin your day no longer triggers you. You will realize that you are making decisions from a place of calm, grounded power, rather than reactive fear. The mirror has changed, not because the world suddenly became kinder, but because the person standing before it has finally become whole. This is the ultimate secret of the mirror effect. The reflection only changes because you have stopped being the person who needed that reflection to exist. You have resolved the internal dissonance that kept those circumstances locked in place. You have integrated the shadows, forgiven the past, and aligned your identity with the version of yourself you are becoming. The world around you is no longer a gauntlet of lessons to be endured, it is a canvas upon which you are now free to paint. As you progress, remember that this is a lifelong practice. There will be days when the mirror seems to show you old images, when the old triggers flare up or the old stories attempt to take the pilot seat. Do not interpret these moments as failure. Interpret them as the final echoes of a system that is being decommissioned. When these moments arise, greet them with the same curiosity and compassion we discussed earlier. See them, acknowledge the part of you that still feels the fear, and then consciously choose the new frequency. You are the sovereign of your own consciousness, and no old habit has the authority to dictate your future unless you grant it that power. The most profound shift you will experience is not in what you have, but in who you are. You will no longer measure your life by the acquisition of external success, but by the depth of your presence, the integrity of your actions, and the stillness of your heart. You will discover that the peace, the abundance, and the love you were searching for were never in the mirror, they were in the one doing the looking. You have simply cleared the glass of your own projection so that you could finally see the truth of your own nature. Carry this understanding with you as you return to the world. Treat your interactions, your challenges, and your triumphs as opportunities for deeper self-awareness. When you are tempted to blame, return to your internal center. When you feel lost, return to your truth. When you feel powerless, remember that you are the architect. The mirror effect is not a tool to be used. It is a reality to be inhabited. It is the realization that you and your world are not two separate things, but a single, unfolding expression of consciousness. You have done the work of looking into the mirror, and you have had the courage to change what you saw. You have broken the chains of the past, silenced the inner critic, and claimed the power of your own design. You are no longer waiting for life to happen. You are the one who is creating the happening. The mirror is clear. The path is open. The person you were waiting for has finally arrived. And that person is you. Chapter Summary. True transformation is often subtle, characterized by the dissolution of old triggers and the emergence of calm, grounded decision-making. The external mirror changes only when we no longer require the old reflection to satisfy the needs or beliefs of our outdated identity. Echoes of the past will arise. These are not failures, but the final release of old conditioning, which should be greeted with compassion and redirected frequency. Lifelong practice is required. Sovereignty over our consciousness is a daily choice to live in alignment with our new identity. The ultimate measure of success is internal wholeness, the stillness and presence we carry regardless of external circumstances. Our peace and abundance were always present at our core. We simply had to clear the projection to see them. We must treat every future interaction as a continuation of our practice, maintaining our role as the architect of our own